Welcome, everybody. I want to welcome you to our Meaningful Death and Disposition webinar event. Today, we're joined by Tara Novak and Penny Waugh, and they're going to talk about how to craft an end-of-life experience that reflects who you are and how you've lived. They'll cover planning a home funeral, all the way to human composting. And they're going to teach us about what's up and coming in the world of death care and final disposition of your body. So Penny Waugh is the founder and CEO of the Death Network, which is an organization with a mission to remove the taboos associated with death and to create safe spaces for everyone to explore what their mortality means to them. Penny is a certified death doula and home funeral arranger based in San Diego. And then our second panelist and presenter is Tara Novak, and she is a San Diego-based end-of-life guide, and she received her training through the International End-of-Life Doula Association.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah.
I'm Penny. This is Tara. We want to explore some of the standard disposition practices that many of us are familiar with, and then also just explore what are some of the up-and-coming trends that may impact some of our decisions at the end of life. Another thing that we're going to dive into is what we like to call our death style. So we all have our own lifestyle, but we are working towards incorporating in what we want our end of life to actually look like and feel like and be like with those that we love, to create a little bit of an end of life experience that really reflects how we lived and who we are authentically. So once we kind of move through some of the disposition information, we will dive into some of that death style. And we thought it would be great to just share what our death style is. And I'll go first. For me, my death style is I really would love to have what's called a living funeral or a living wake. So I want to gather with my friends and my family and my community before I die and just really take in all that emotion and love, and even bring a little bit of a celebration into how I lived my life. There's a saying that goes, how we live is how we die. And I really want my end of life experience to reflect the life that I lived and be celebrated with those that I love. And after that fantastic event, I'm hoping that I'll be able to die at home and even have a home funeral where I'm just, my body would be prepared at home. I would be shrouded. I would have a small, intimate ceremony after my death with those that I love. And then I would be whisked away to a conservation cemetery or a green burial cemetery. So that's my personal death style. Tara, what's yours?
Well, for me, I kind of want a little bit of a quieter atmosphere. I know Penny wants a really celebratory and exciting kind of lively space. I like my home, which is where the place that I would prefer to die, if that's an option, to be a sanctuary. So I'd love a quiet, intimate space where I can see my friends and family one-on-one or in small groups and gather together to sort of just talk about our lives and share stories and share why we're important to one another. For me, sustainability is really important, and living with just environmentally minded. So I'd like to die environmentally minded as well. I'd love for there to be as much reusable products bedside as possible. I know that in the death industry and in death and dying, there's a lot of single-use items, and I'd like to eliminate that as much as possible. I know that it can't be completely eliminated, but I think it would reflect my lifestyle and just my wishes and the way I've lived, to intentionally make an effort to have it be as sustainable as possible. Like Penny, I'd love to die at home. I know that's not an option for everybody, and that is just wonderful if it can happen. I'd love to have just a small gathering at my home, the same thing, a small home funeral, be shrouded, and then as quickly as possible, even eliminating the need for a funeral home, go straight to a green burial site or any of the other cool, really, really cool new up and coming options that are available for green burial, burial at sea, or something like that.
Yeah, so let's dive into some of our current disposition methods. We're going to kind of work our way backwards a little bit. So we're going to start by taking a look at the current disposition methods. Some are the ones that you're going to be familiar with. Some might surprise you. There's some new up and coming trends. And then we'll work back into how you can kind of craft your own death style.
So all of us are probably familiar with a traditional burial at a traditional cemetery. That would start with something like purchasing a plot for you and your spouse or for yourself in sort of a real estate type transaction. You would then maybe embalm your body. You can embalm your body, but you don't have to. And people don't really know that a lot about a traditional burial. That is not required necessarily for a traditional burial. You might want to be embalmed for viewing if you intend to have a funeral where you're viewed by your friends and family, let's say in a church or even at your home or whatever location, the funeral home, whatever suits your needs. If you do embalm, it does extend the timeline that you can wait until you have your funeral. If you have friends and family out of the country or out of state that need time to all gather and come to attend your memorial, and they do all want to see you, that's a great way to sort of keep yourself available for viewing if you'd like that. Embalming, though, is not great for the environment. Embalming fluids are a lot of different kind of chemicals, including formaldehyde, that are not necessarily the most environmentally friendly. When they do embalm someone, your fluids are replaced with those embalming fluids and sent into wastewater treatment in your municipality. Just sort of down the drain.
Yeah.
Right into the same sort of treatment that waste products from your home would go into. But it definitely isn't the most gold standard for environmentally friendly practices. 30% of all U.S. dispositions are in a traditional cemetery. Most people think of that as one of the only options, and it is really expensive, or it can be really expensive. You have to think about the costs of if you're going to be embalmed or if you're not going to be embalmed. You have to think about the cost of your casket. Do you want a casket? The least expensive casket you can get is probably around the $600 to $700 range, and they can go up to $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 depending on how you want to be entombed forever. Traditionally, a funeral can probably cost about $10,000 on average if you want to go with the traditional burial. So it is one of the more expensive options that are out there.
Yeah. What's interesting with traditional burial was pretty much the go-to for many years. In the 70s, cremation kind of started becoming another option. I was doing a little research, and in the 70s, which was 50 years ago.
Yeah, 50 years ago.
Cremation was only 4% of our disposition methods. Fast forward to today, and cremation is about 58% of all United States dispositions, and that number continues to grow. One of the reasons for cremation gaining that amount of popularity in a very short time, a lot of it is price driven. A cremation is a lot less expensive than a burial. And there are different levels of cremation. So there's what's called direct cremation, which is pretty much from death, you're going right into the cremation process. There really isn't an opportunity for a viewing. A lot of times people will have a celebration or life or something like that after the cremation. But with a direct cremation, which usually costs about $1,000, it's kind of, you're dying, maybe in the hospital, maybe at home, but you're going right to the cremation center to be directly cremated. From there, you can layer in some of those services that are usually offered at a traditional burial. So you can be embalmed prior to being cremated if you want to have a viewing. So if your family is out of the state or needs to travel in, a lot of people will opt to be embalmed prior to being cremated. So that just extends that timeline and allows your family to gather for that traditional viewing and ceremony after your death. Unfortunately, cremation is not as environmentally friendly as we may think it is. One cremated body has the same emissions as driving your car about 600 miles. So while it's definitely more convenient, it still is kind of impacting our earth in a negative way. And then when you couple that with the growth of the cremations, almost 60% of the dispositions today are cremation. And so that is just, putting all that out into our atmosphere. But with all that being said, if you were to opt for cremation, but also go with the embalming and have a service, you're looking at about half the price of a traditional funeral service if you go with cremation as your choice of disposition. And also, the remains are returned to the family. So there is that legacy factor where the family is able to, hold on to the cremains, scatter them, or do other things with them. So a lot of times people will also opt for cremation because it just brings a little bit of closure into the death process.
Hydrolysis is really like cremation. It's also called water cremation or aqua cremation. So you would still get that same sort of legacy, having your ashes returned to your friends and family. You actually do end up with about 20% more remains or cremains or aqua cremains with water cremation as opposed to traditional fire cremation. And it does produce about 90% less emissions than in a traditional cremation because you're not burning up the carbon and releasing that into the atmosphere. Aqua cremation basically is the body is placed in a vessel, the same way it would be placed in a cremation vessel, but it's a water-based vessel. So it's closed, it's under pressure, and heated so that it's sort of, rather than burning the tissue, it would dissolve the tissue. And in that process, it does reduce the emissions, and it's a little bit of interesting way that it does go into the wastewater system. So it's not as though those remains are necessarily not going into our environment. It's just a better way to enter the environment rather than into the atmosphere. It takes about 2 to 4 hours for aqua cremation, which is really fast. Traditional cremation can take 1 to 2 hours. And when you're thinking about that, that's really, really high heat for a very extended amount of time. The aqua cremation is less impactful because it doesn't have that high heat and that burning, but it is a little bit longer of a time. So it does require energy in the form of electricity. But again, you are returned to your family in the same way if you want to maintain that legacy. Or if you want to have your cremains to spread your ashes or keep at home or share amongst your loved ones. Right now, water cremation is a little more expensive, actually more like 4 times more expensive than the cost of a traditional cremation. But that's because it's just not as available. Not everybody knows about it. Once it does become more commonplace, it will continue to just get less and less expensive. It's just not as readily available. And it's nowhere near that 58% of dispositions. It's much lower, less than 5% of dispositions, probably even lower than that. Yeah.
And we do actually have a hydrolysis center in San Diego County, up in North County, White Rose. They provide that hydrolysis water cremation. And we can provide contact information at the end of this for those of you who are interested in that too. Yeah. Another kind of popular one that comes up is body donation. And, body donation is kind of interesting because it's really a huge gift to our society when people do donate either their organs or their whole bodies. And then a lot of people just think it's a little bit weird because of what science will sometimes do especially with a whole body donation. But it really, really is such an impactful legacy to leave. It aids in medical education. It helps with disease research. and also saves lives by, offering your eyes and your other organs to somebody who may not survive without them is really a beautiful way to leave a legacy. The one thing about body donation is it definitely has to be arranged prior to death. And the more advanced time, the better. Sometimes when you're doing a whole body donation, they're going to want to review your medical history and any conditions that you have to make sure that you're a right fit for their scientific research or for their medical research. So exploring the body donation options prior to death is a necessity for sure. Same with organ donation. You want to make sure that's something that you've talked through with your family ahead of time as well, and also just have all the paperwork and all those loose ends kind of tied up before you step into death. With body donation, oftentimes the bodies will be cremated and then scattered as into the ocean typically. And so sometimes the remains cannot be returned to the family. But knowing that legacy of what that person has offered to our world in regards to a whole body donation to science or to medical research, just kind of satisfies that need for having the remains returned. And that's not always the rule. So definitely, again, that's something you want to look into prior to making those decisions, especially if you want to have your loved one returned or if you want to make sure you return to your family. One of the beautiful things about body donation is oftentimes it can eliminate pretty much all the expenses involved in the death and disposition. So body donation organizations typically will pay for your transportation. They will pay for your cremation. So really the only thing, left for you to fund would be maybe a celebration of life or some type of a service. But it definitely can make an impact financially and also from a legacy perspective.
And once organized, it really gives your family a peace of mind.
Yeah.
Right. Body donation is the easiest way for your family to have your disposition set up at the end because it all is tied in together through those organizations. They take care of everything. So once your loved one or you yourself have passed, there's no guesswork for anybody that's left.
Right. Okay, now we're going to take a look at some of those emerging trends.
All right. So I talked about traditional burial. We're going to talk about burial again, but a little different. Green burial. So green burial, I would think in my mind seems more traditional than traditional burial, right? It's older. It doesn't require any sort of technology, however old that technology may be. It doesn't require any sort of intervention, right? So a body wouldn't typically be embalmed. You can go directly from your final place of life to your final resting place. Your family can accompany you. You can have a home funeral. They can tend to your body in the home, and you never really need to involve anyone outside. You do need to have a permit to transfer the body, and that's where a funeral director would come in. But it's really the most hands-off, or can be the most hands-off as far as involving outside entities, right? It's like a funeral home. Green burial is basically very similar to traditional burial. You're buried in the ground, but you are buried 3.5 feet deep. So there's still all those microorganisms that are there and available to recycle your body. And it's deep enough so you don't have to worry about any of the organisms above ground recycling your body. It's very eco-friendly. Your body goes directly into the earth. You get to feed all the plants and animals, flora and fauna, mycelium, all of nature. So you get to really become part of nature and go back to where we all started. It can be really great for a family. It can be really great for closure, and it can be very hands-on. It doesn't have to be, but if your family wants to be involved, they can be involved as much as they like. Your family can even dig your grave if they like, and you can be present for that at the end of your life too, if that's something that really appeals to you. So it gives you a lot of options. and a lot of options to connect with your community in a more direct way than a traditional burial and a traditional funeral in a funeral home. It's more intimate. Even if you have a large group of people attending, it's more intimate experience. You're all connecting with each other and the earth. It isn't necessarily as readily available as a traditional burial, and it's not exactly done in the same way. Some places it is, but some places it's not, right? So it's not as though you're purchasing a piece of real estate where you'll be forever. A lot of times in like a conservation cemetery, you're purchasing a right to be buried or entombed in that conservation cemetery. So that entire place is your final resting place. There are a lot of cemeteries in the United States.
Yes.
There are 144,000 cemeteries in the United States. And there's only 443 green cemeteries. And those can range from portion of a traditional cemetery, which is the most traditional, would look like what we're used to, all the way over to a conservation cemetery, which you just would become part of the land, and the land is conserved for future generations to enjoy as well. It is a little bit less expensive than a traditional burial, and typically when you're buying your right to be buried, it's far less expensive than it would be to buy a real estate portion of a funeral plot. A green burial can be as little as $1,200 if you're just going directly to a conservation cemetery, and it averages more at $4,000. You can also add on those services, as you see fit. If you want to have a funeral in your home, in a church, you might not do a viewing the same way you would do with an embalmed body, but those things are always available to you. It would just be a final resting place in a more environmentally friendly way, if that aligns with how you lived your life and how you want your death.
Yeah. I'm going to go off script for a minute because I don't think a lot of people realize that green burial is actually how we used to do it before basically Lincoln died, Abraham Lincoln, and the Civil War. So when Abraham Lincoln died, his body was put on a train and he went around the United States so everybody could pay their last respects. And he was heavily embalmed, obviously, for that trip. And then also during the Civil War, when soldiers were dying on the field, originally they were pretty much buried on the field. And then families were calling to have their loved ones returned. And so embalming became a practice actually on the war field so that soldiers could be returned home to their loved ones. And from there, it just kind of snowballed into what we see today as our traditional burials. But when you go back, and this was only 75, 80 years ago, when you go back prior to that timeline, green burials, home funerals, and community death care, which is having your family and the community basically walk you through those final steps of death. That's really how we used to do it. So we're just excited to see some of these time-honored traditions kind of resurfacing. But because they happened, close to 100 years ago, a lot of us just aren't familiar with them. So that's in the nutshell, the history of green burial there. Sea burial, which is something that was kind of new to me.
Yeah, new to me too. I think it's wonderful, and I had never really heard of this exact thing before.
Yeah. So with the sea burial, as you can see in our picture here, this casket is going to basically be launched into the ocean. So these actually take place in San Diego. They're extremely cost effective. The burial fee for a sea burial it starts at about $700. So a couple of things with them, they kind of walk that line between being, a little more eco-friendly than some of the other options. Preferably you're not embalmed when you're doing a sea burial because you want your body to, decompose and be absorbed by the ocean. So we already put enough yucky things into our ocean. We don't need to be putting embalming fluid in there as well. So it's preferred that you're not embalmed, which may impact how you have your wake or service beforehand. You want to be in a shroud or a casket. Here, this casket, I wouldn't consider it necessarily an ocean-friendly casket. Looks like it has a lot of hardware. It has paint on it, has some embellishments. So it's recommended that you're either shrouded or maybe even in a cardboard casket or a natural wood casket that isn't embellished with the hardware and the finishes and things like that. And if you're in a casket, they will drill some holes, and in there they will add weights and maybe even some sand, so that when you are placed into the ocean, the casket will sink pretty quickly. And also your family can participate. So your family can either kind of watch the boat take you out from the shoreline, or they can accompany you on the boat and participate in your entrance into the ocean for the sea burial.
Yeah, I really like the sea burial. I even called my dad when I found about this, and I said, "Dad, do you have a minute to talk about your disposition?" And he did. So we talked about it, and I think that's something that really just resonates with my family and me too. It's a really green way to have your final disposition.
Yeah, especially because your dad was a surfer.
He is a surfer.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
those people that like
the ocean is really his happy place, and it really resonates with him. So I said, I'm not sure that you know about this, but I think it would really align with your values.
Nice.
I'm really excited about new technologies, right? That are coming up in this industry. So the mushroom casket or mycelium casket or the living casket. It's a really cool new technology. It's coming out of Europe. It's sort of a high-tech, low-tech kind of way to give back to the earth at the end of your life. So the mushroom casket is made out of mycelium. It is grown, not produced. They grow it into a form that is lined with wood chips so that the mycelium does have a place to grow. It only takes about 7 days for the entire casket to be formed.
Wow.
So the mycelium grows really quick. Once that process is done, they will dry the casket so it becomes hard and able to be shipped and able to kind of handle the weight of a body. So the mushroom casket is itself a decomposer. So you're going to be in the mushroom casket starting, it would be a dried casket. So it wouldn't be activated, and it would just be as though we were in, let's say, just a wooden casket is the same thing. But it is lined with moss. So it's a really, really beautiful and aesthetic way to view a body or to just have your body laid to rest. When you are going to be turned into the ground, it would be in a green burial. You can also use them in a traditional burial. There's no reason why they wouldn't be allowed in any cemetery. But typically what's done is the mushroom casket is sprayed with water to activate the mycelium, basically bring it back to life, so that the mycelium acts as an aid in the decomposition of your body. Once it's buried in the ground, depending on the environment, because we usually would do better in a high moisture environment for the fungus to do its job. It can speed up the decomposition process. It can reduce it about 75%. Wow. It can be from 2 to 3 years. In a traditional burial with an unembalmed body, it would probably take closer to 10 years, even 20 years, depending on the type of casket. So it's much quicker, and you are returned to the earth in a much more efficient way because the mycelium helps return you to the earth. What's a really cool thing about the mycelium that I found in this research, it actually cleans all the heavy metals and toxins that are in your body. So not only does it decompose or sort of reduce organic matter, it helps with those inorganic matters that our body absorbs just living in a modern society. So it's really cool. It really just is a very clean way to have your body return to the earth.
Yeah. And I just love the little mossy bed that you get to lay
it's just
on.
like the most aesthetic. Well, yeah. I mean, the green burial photo is really pretty, but it's very aesthetically pleasing.
It is. And then human composting, and this is probably the hottest trend right now. It will be legal in California in 2027, which is really exciting. And it really is kind of tied directly to green burial and some of those more natural methods. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with composting. A lot of people will compost their food scraps and things like that. And really the human body is no different, because we are born, our bodies know how to die, and our bodies also know what to do after we die, which is decompose and go back into the earth primarily. So with human composting, obviously you would not be embalmed because you want your body to be in a natural state. And there's a couple different methods that you can go with. There's up in Washington, there's a forest called Herland Forest, and there they compost bodies out in the environment. So they have big wooden drums, and they layer a lot of organic material, natural material in the drum, and then your body is placed within the drum. And you, from there, the outside elements work to create that internal environment where your body will start turning into compost. And you're turned a couple times, regularly, just like we do with our food scraps in our compost barrels. You'll get turned and turned. And I believe it's about 90 days out you come, and it's a lot of compost, like our friend in the picture is holding here. And one human body will actually fill up the bed of a standard pickup truck. So a lot of people will opt for just taking a little bit of that compost home with them to put in their own gardens or to share with family and friends. And then the remaining compost oftentimes is donated to their conservation forest up in Herland. There's another method, because not everybody lives in an environment like we do where the sun shines and we have kind of those ideal temperatures for composting. So there is climate controlled human composting as well. There's a facility many people may have heard of. It's called Recompose, and they operate indoors with same type of barrel system. They are mostly stainless steel instead of wood, like at Herland Forest, and they are electronically monitored for climate control. So there, it's even quicker than the 90 days. And again, the same amount of compost is returned. So that full pickup truck bed full of compost is what your body will turn into. And from there, you can decide how much of that you want to take home or give to your loved ones and send home. So a natural composting, which is the outdoor method, usually runs about $5,000. And then those climate controlled composting methods climb up to about $9,000. So while they're not quite as price friendly as some of our other natural options are, they definitely are very earth friendly.
And they're available.
Yes.
They're very readily available as some of the other options might not be currently as available.
Right. And just because it's not legal here in California, there are composting businesses that you can pre-arrange with, and they will actually transport your body upon death in California to their facility. A lot of them are up in the Seattle area. There's going to be a facility opening in Las Vegas, I believe, next year. So those organizations will transport you to their composting center, and they will then return home. If you get transported and they're returning home the compost, they're not going to return home the full pickup truck bed full of compost. They're going to send home about like 5 gallons of that compost to your family.
What I think is really cool about a lot of the new trends is they're really high tech to return us back to the really low tech way of returning to the earth, right? So in traditional dispositions, we're really used to using technology to sort of preserve us the way we are as when we're alive, or with cremation, to just do it quickly. But a lot of the using new technology to just return to the old ways is really cool. Right. It's really nice to see some effort being put that way.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so we ran through what disposition options look like. And now we're going to dive into what can you do before you die to really kind of make a plan that honors who you are and how you lived and some of those things that you want to achieve before you go.
Yeah, a lot of us really think about the practical matters, like what we want for our disposition, or our trust or estate planning, or making it easier for our families. That's really can be a focus before we pass away or before we even are close to the end of life. But a lot of times we don't think about how we want our actual end of life to look, what would reflect our, our values and our lifestyle, and how we can die a good death intentionally, right? And make that just, be part of our death, be a part of how we lived.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we forgot about
That's
this.
okay. It kind of turns it. Part of deciding what we want our death to be is
we forgot about
deciding
this.
how we want our family to remember us, right? So part of dying a good death is leaving a legacy to our family.
Yes.
So that can be done with a lot of really cool memorial gifts. So as part of our planning, before we decide what we want our actual death to look like, we can plan how we want our family to remember us, right? So a lot of really cool options are out there to provide your family with sort of a memorial gift, right? So one of the newer options out there that is definitely one of those technology-based, science-based options is parting stones. Parting stones are basically solidified cremains. So prior to that, you would provide your cremains, you would have a cremation to the company that makes the parting stones. They're compressed into about 40 to 80 stones. So you can divide them amongst your family. You can kind of spread them as you would ashes, and it's a stone. You do need a permit, the same way you would any other remains, but who's going to check and see what the rock is made out of if you're taking it on a plane? It is kind of one of the more expensive options for post cremation is $2,500. But if you have a lot of family and they want to keep you with them, it might be a really good option to sort of share that gift with them.
Yeah. Jewelry is a really a lovely way to carry somebody with you that you've lost. So there is a ton of options out there. Etsy is full of all types of memorial jewelry gifts. And what they do is they just take a little bit of your ashes and they're incorporated into the jewelry. Like I said, there's unlimited options. There's rings, necklaces, bracelets for men, for women. There's kids. There's fingerprint jewelry. It's really unlimited and a really beautiful and relatively inexpensive way to share yourself with your loved ones after you're gone. And it's a really a beautiful kind of personal way to give somebody a little gift at the end of your life.
Memorial gifts or items have just been around forever. So if you think back to the Victorian times, there's mourning jewelry or mourning art that might be made out of the deceased person's hair. And that is just a way for the family to kind of keep in touch with them or, keep their memory alive. Now we have things that like glass ornaments to keep as keepsakes. Those can range in price, just like the jewelry. They can be as little as $100 and they can range up from there, where a little bit of your loved one's ashes are incorporated into something that you can keep on your shelf. It can be anything from a sphere or a globe, a really beautiful glass item, or it could be something that reflects the personality of the deceased. Let's say you're really into ducks or birds and you'd like your family to remember you that way. Let's say hummingbird is your favorite animal. Some of your ashes could be incorporated into a glass hummingbird that your family can hang in a window so that reflects you into the home.
Yeah, that's really lovely. And one last kind of new thing to do with your ashes or your cremains after your death is you can fire them off into space. So there is a thing called space burial. A small amount of your remains are placed onto a little spaceship, and the spaceship goes up into our atmosphere, launches you into space. And what happens is everything, with gravity and everything, upon re-entry, your cremains just kind of disintegrate. And so this is kind of more of a, I don't know,
a
fun way,
interesting, or
a little different.
How to go out with a bang.
Yeah, there you go.
It's a good way to go out with a bang.
Now, if the environment is something that you're concerned about, this is not necessarily one of the most environmentally friendly ones, mainly from gas emissions from the spaceship taking your small amount of cremains to be launched. And it costs about $2,000 to send your cremains up into space.
Something similar to that Earthside would be like a burial wreath.
Oh yeah,
where you can send some of your cremated remains into a memorial wreath, and the cost of that goes to kind of repopulating reefs that have died due to reef die-off or bleaching.
Yeah.
So they're repopulating reefs. It goes into sort of a framework.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to move on to some of the things that you might consider before you're considering dispositions and memorial gifts. And we have our friend here, and she's saying, don't mind me, I'm just daydreaming about my death. And these are some of the things that people might think about, some of the things they want to have happen before they're gone.
Yeah. If you planned your end of life, it gives you just endless amounts of agency, right? A lot of times when we are going into our end of life, that's something that we can lose very quickly. So if we set up an intentionality to our end of life, it gives us that agency that we are longing for, right? And it helps create how we want to be remembered, and we get to set up an environment of who we'd like to spend our time with, and like we said, like your death style, how you want the end of your life to look.
Yeah. And a lot of times, people will plan for things to happen after their death. Like, oh, so-and-so is going to get this and so-and-so is going to get that. But what if we took the opportunity before we died to sit down with those that we loved and that we wanted to gift some of these cherished items to? How beautiful is it to share the story of that item face to face with somebody that you're handing it off to, and create a legacy like that. And it just makes sure that the items that you want to end up in specific hands actually end up in specific hands, and can eliminate some of that maybe family conflict that comes about when
emotions are heightened, right?
There you go. Yes.
At the end of life, that can be a really emotional time for everybody.
Yeah.
So it eliminates some of that emotional hardship for your family, and also just gives you a really important chance to connect.
Right.
And on that sort of note, are there any loose ends that you need to tie up? Is there anything that would make your end of life go more smoothly as far as relationships go? A lot of times we definitely plan for, we have our trust and all of that in order, but there's those relationship ties that maybe we would like to also put in order before our end of life.
Yeah. And also maybe there's some things that you want to do before you die, but asking your family maybe seems like they're already stretched thin. They're already maybe a little stressed out, a little emotional because of your pending death. So, being able to bring somebody into the mix to have them take you to that one last favorite cafe, or walk your dog to the park, or, just something special that you want to have take place before you're gone.
You can also bring someone in to curate your space. Like Penny wants a lively space full of, celebration. I would prefer a quiet space. So if you bring someone in, they can help kind of help you curate that space, right? What kind of music you'd like, how you want the end of your life to look, even smell. If you like essential oils, or if you want it to smell like nothing, maybe you're sensitive to fragrances. Or if, you want it to smell like your favorite perfume so everybody can remember you.
Right. And also just maybe some help with the planning. Again, a lot of times at the end of life, I feel like those who are dying are hesitant to ask for help sometimes because they may feel like a burden, and we don't really like that word, but sometimes that's how people feel. They're afraid to ask for help with some of these things, or they might think it's a little bit weird. Oh, I want to have a living wake. Well, partnering with somebody that can help you make some of these things happen, that just kind of settle your heart and your mind prior to death.
And it can give you just a place to explore what you want your end of life to look like. If you haven't even thought about that before, you can bring someone in to just kind of bounce ideas off of, and to help set up that home funeral at the end of life. If you don't know what that looks like, and you won't necessarily be there to tell people what you want,
Right.
That's a trusted friend or companion that can, express your wishes to your family and your loved ones.
Yeah. Yeah. So, this is kind of what Tara and I do. We we consider ourselves end of life guides. You also hear the term death doulas. And what we do is we just step into those moments before and after death when the dying person needs somebody to advocate for them or just help them put these plans into action. And so, we kind of, a lot of people ask, like, oh, what does a death doula do? And, sometimes it's hard to really put it into words, but, we kind of narrowed it down to kind of 4 things that an end of life guide can help you with. And the first one is maybe the most important one, but it's just to curate that space so that you can connect with your family and friends based on your wishes. And what that can be is as simple as creating a visitation schedule or maybe limiting the visitation schedule based on who it is and your relationship. But it's just really making sure that your journey to the end of life is as reflective as it can be of your wishes and also as peaceful and loving as it can be with the right people at the right time.
Yeah, an end of life doula is a companion that can help you far before the end of your life and up through the very, very end. They can start anytime. And they come to you without any judgment or expectation, right? They can create a safe space for you to work out what you even want. You might not have thought about it before. You might have everything planned out to the T, but they can help you flesh out those ideas. And they can also help you enact those ideas, right? Put those ideas into action so that your end of life can be the best that it can. A lot of times it's easy for one to ask friends and family members for this, but when you ask them, you might kind of censor yourself because you know what they feel or what they expect or their personal values, and maybe they won't align with yours, or maybe you're afraid to even ask. So when you have somebody coming into the space that doesn't have those same sort of ties to that sort of to your end of life, they want to just help you, right? They don't have any personal notion of what they want it to look like. It would be a companion that would just be there for support.
Yeah. And one of the ways we support too is by supporting the people that you're going to be leaving behind and bringing that compassionate support to the entire process. So not just for the person who's dying, but also there to, let's say, for an example, you are choosing to die at home and your family is going to be participating in that experience. Most of us have not witnessed an active dying phase at the end of life. And it can be a little bit scary sometimes. And, there can be weird noises, and the death rattle is a real thing. And so an end of life guide can really help to educate the family on what's to come as you move through the death process and be there as a compassionate support for them and for you before, during, and after death. So it's a really just kind of a lovely way to bring a little bit of peace and organization and support into the end of life.
A lot of times people think hospice might be responsible for these sort of emotional or practical aspects, but hospice is kind of at this point stretched thin, right? It's all of our medical facilities are kind of stretched thin. And if you're at home on hospice, you'll see someone maybe 2 or 3 times a week, and they'll be able to help your family understand what they need to do medically and to keep you comfortable, but they're not necessarily there for the same sort of compassionate support, emotional support, or to help it look like how you want it to look. Therefore, they're more for the medical practical support. They don't help you with your dishes or any of that stuff to kind of alleviate the daily tasks from your family, so they do have time to just connect with you.
Yeah. And interesting, when I was researching hospice, originally hospice really did kind of encapsulate the compassion and the emotional support. That was kind of the cornerstone of hospice. It was the blend of spiritual and medical. And hospice originated in London and came over to the US. And once it became integrated into our Medicare system, that's when a lot of the what I guess our government would deem unnecessary tasks, like the emotional, spiritual support for the dying person and the family. Some of those just kind of got stripped out of hospice, and so now it truly has kind of come down to hospice workers at your house, maybe a couple hours a day, and they really are there just for that medical and to make sure the pain is being managed and all of those things. And that's where end of life guides or death doulas really complement that hospice process. So we ourselves don't do anything medical. Sometimes we can help facilitate and organize medical procedures and processes and medication and things like that. But we are hands off when it comes to the medical. So just a nice comment to the hospice.
Sure, yeah. And another thing, people think of clergy or faith-based support for spiritual support. And that's wonderful along with hospice, but those are very specific things. As an end-of-life doula or guide, we would fill in sort of the middle spaces that are left.
Yeah. Okay. Before we move into our questions and answers, we would love to connect with you. Tara and I both have our cell phone numbers up there and our email addresses. And, we know that a lot of what we do is, even though it's kind of time honored and has been around a long time, it just isn't necessarily as mainstream as it used to be. And we're pretty passionate about bringing some of these time-honored practices back into the mainstream. And so we love to talk about it. I don't know if you can tell or not, but we love to talk about it. And we're here to answer questions and be a support for those who are at the end of life, which we're all going to be there at one point.
Yeah. So feel free to contact us with any questions that you might not come up with in this meeting, or if we don't address anything, we'll be able to answer those for you whenever you're ready.
Well, Penny and Tara, thank you so much. We have a lot of questions, so let's get started.
Thank you. If you're willing to share, how did each of you choose or get into this line of work? And I must also thank you for what you do. It just, this sounds like you really, really help people, both in the planning and also to family and friends afterwards.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Well, my story is a little bit, I call it a midlife crisis, but I worked in the corporate world for over 30 years. And as my parents were aging and I started becoming more familiar with our healthcare system and death care system, I just was really appalled by what I was seeing. And the fact that as a society, we don't like to talk about it very much. I just felt this calling to step into this space. And so I left my corporate job a little over a year ago, studied to become a doula, and just I feel like I made the right decision, even though some days I still think I'm a little bit crazy for doing this. But for me, it was, I couldn't spend the last 10 years of my life in my soul sucking job, or 10 years of my professional life, I should say, in a soul sucking job. I didn't sit well with me. And so I love what I do, and I think it's much needed. And that's how I got into it.
For me, I've always, even as a small child, felt really connected with end of life, or just sort of saw the end of life as a part of life and a transition that is, I've never personally been afraid of that transition. While grief is a universal experience, I think that I've always been really comfortable in that space, just even as a child and growing up, and experiencing that in my own life. I've always handled the practical matters for my family personally. And I felt, really connected, and it helps me to feel like I'm doing my part to help people with that, because it can be a really emotional time for people. So a lot of that, alleviating some of that burden from the practical stuff, it really gives me a sense of purpose. And when I found out a death doula is a thing, I looked up, death doula trainings in San Diego, and there was one like 2 weekends away. So it's sort of, for me, just has kind of come together and aligned itself. When it was time for me to start seeking community, I immediately found community. So for me, it feels like everything's sort of clicking into place, aligning professionally and, community-based death care with, just where I feel comfortable in the space that, comes from my heart.
I guess my question is, for someone who plans to die at home without medical intervention, how does the family avoid the necessity of having the coroner come and inspect the body before the body can be released for services or funeral preparations?
I'll answer that
Yeah.
question. I actually volunteer for an organization called Trauma Intervention Programs, and we go out to the home with law enforcement upon death.
Okay.
So here in San Diego County, we have a medical examiner, and anytime that somebody dies at home, unfortunately, it does need to kind of go through law enforcement. So that would be calling the paramedics, or basically calling 911 after somebody dies. The paramedics and law enforcement will come out to the house. And when they determine that it's a natural death and there's no reason for the medical examiner to come out, then over the phone, they have this conversation, and the medical examiner will provide law enforcement with a waiver number. And that waiver number is all that you need to move forward to the next steps.
Okay.
So with a waiver number, you can now call a funeral home, or whatever your method of disposition is after you die. But you do have to have that medical, or that ME waiver number, in order to get transportation and death certificates and things like that.
Of course.
So they don't so the medical examiner doesn't always come out, but there is always a phone call between law enforcement and the medical examiner just to determine that it's a natural death.
If you're home on hospice, the hospice can arrange that too. So you wouldn't have to, or your family wouldn't have to deal with those calls directly necessarily. If you've been seen by your doctor within about 3 weeks of your death, they can just go ahead and sign that off directly. So if you're under a doctor's care, they have already know your condition, and you're on hospice, the hospice can sort of act as an intermediary.
They will still call the medical.
Yes, but you don't have to call them yourself. Your family doesn't have to call them.
Yeah, but
directly.
But the medical examiner either will show up or give a waiver number. Those are the only two options with them.
Yeah, you either can call and get that number yourself, or if you are on hospice, the hospice will take care of that for you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And my question was purely joking, kind of a laugh out loud situation. But, we've been told that for years we've been ingesting microplastics in our drinking water. So I meant kind of half-heartedly. So in a way, we're kind of embalming ourselves way before the fact.
Yeah, we're exchanging our organic matter for inorganic matter every day we're living. That's kind of something that, we all have to contend with, right? The microplastics are everywhere. They're in us, they're around us, they're in the ocean, they're in our food. I think a really cool thing that's up and coming is that mycelium casket, because it can decompose those inorganic materials as well, which is really cool. So while we're not necessarily embalming ourselves per se, we are making ourselves less organic just by living in, modern society.
Yeah.
We did get a number of people asking with the aquamation or alkaline hydrolysis, what happens to the remains, or what is left behind after that process?
Sure. So what the family would get would be the same sort of things as you would with ashes. And what's left would be pulverized bone. You're left with 20% more because it isn't turned into carbon in that fire cremation process. The portion that would either go into the atmosphere during a traditional cremation that with aquamation or cremation is turned into a liquid that is sent into the wastewater system. So kind of similarly to a traditional cremation, you are released, the portion that is either burned or dissolved is released into the environment. It is treated through municipal wastewater management if you do opt for aquamation, and that is definitely less impactful than the emissions from a traditional cremation.
All right, let's go to Chris Palmer.
Great. Thank you so much. So Penny and Tara, is a great presentation. I wanted to ask you about end-of-life guides and their relationship to hospice. You talked about that, and you quite rightly pointed out how they sort of dovetail together beautifully, because hospice is short-staffed, as you explained. But I wanted to ask you, what does a person do if they don't have a lot of money and can't afford the cost of an end-of-life guide or an end-of-life death, a doula? I mean, the hospice is covered by Medicare typically. And any thoughts on what a person who doesn't have many resources might do in that situation?
Sure. A lot of end-of-life doulas work on a sliding scale. So while there is always cost associated, it can be a lot less for people who are not able to, pay as much as somebody who has more means. And also, a lot of people can work pro bono work in addition to their traditional income making work. And different doula services can be purchased a la carte, right? If you just want someone to help curate your space, somebody can come in and do that. Everybody works differently. I think that there's options for everybody. And I think a lot of, I can speak for myself, and I'm sure I can speak for Penny too. We want to make this care accessible to everybody. That's really important for us, right? While a good death isn't available to everyone, depending on circumstances, we want it to be as available to everyone that can experience that. And for myself, at least, I know that I will work with families and people, and meet them where they're at.
Chris, just to piggyback on that, there's a phrase that gets tossed around a lot in our industry, which is community death care. And, I'm going to go back to what I've said before, but it's how we used to do it. And so part of our initiative really is to get people comfortable talking about death and get people comfortable helping their loved ones die at home or wherever it may be. So along with just providing services, we also want to make sure we're providing that education so that people feel comfortable stepping into that moment, and you don't necessarily have to hire somebody to come in. So a lot of what we do too is, oftentimes there's family members that are very interested in what we're doing, and we bring them alongside us so that when we're not there, they can kind of continue some of these rituals and practices and things like that. So we're educating our community is a huge piece of what we do. And one other final thing, I don't even know if you know this, but in New York, they're actually doing a study because they want to bring the primarily birth doulas, because that's a little more well-known than death doulas, but they're doing a study to bring the doula profession under the insurance umbrella, so that when it's not accessible privately, then people can access it through their insurance plan. So that's probably a long ways off, but it's really nice to see movement going in that direction and acknowledgement of our role in the birth and death process.
One question, Penny and Tara, is that Jessica Mitford, in her famous book, called the funeral industry predatory. And I just wanted, how you feel about that, and whether you feel the same way, or any thoughts?
I was trying to kind of avoid saying that directly. But as an end-of-life doula, we generally try to meet people where they're at. So we wouldn't want to necessarily our friend says, yuck people's yums. So if somebody really likes the traditional funeral industry, it might not be our favorite thing personally, but we want to make sure that we honor their wishes, right? Both of us have said we like the idea of a green burial, and we like to sort of work outside that traditional mainstream. I get letters in the mail at least once a week from different sort of corporate funeral venues that don't necessarily align with my values.
Yeah, and I would say, in any industry there is greed, corruption, you name it. It's in every industry, and the funeral home industry and mortuary industry has become a little more corporate. A lot of the independent family-owned funeral homes have been bought up by some major entities, and they're big companies, and the bottom line is their bottom line. It's how they make their money. And so they've been able to, streamline some processes. I know that here in San Diego, there's a couple of larger corporate funeral homes. They're still kind of independently named, but if you peel back the layer and look, you'll see a lot of them are owned by a couple of major entities in the funeral industry. And so my thoughts would be, do your homework, find out who really owns that funeral home, and look into that organization a little bit, read the reviews, talk to your friends about it. If they've had a good experience at a funeral home, you want to know about it. If they've had a bad experience, you want to know about it. But I will say, I don't think it's any different than any other money-making industry where there's good and maybe not so good things going on. We've been able to connect with a couple of different funeral directors here in San Diego who really align with what we're doing and are very supportive of what we're doing. And they are not that type of funeral director that's mentioned in that book. Their hearts are in it for their hearts. They're not in it for their wallets. And so we intentionally seek out that supportive death care community through funeral directors and other hospice workers and things like that. And then we try to align with those that align with our vision and stay away from the money hungry, the ones in the book. We stay away from the ones in the book.
I think it's pretty easy to find somebody that you find that your values align with, right? You can very quickly tell whether they're in it for their heart and the right reasons, or if they're in it as a corporation to, take your money and make you feel scared and say, you better get this done now, or there aren't any other options, or if you don't do this, your family's going to be left this way. So if you're working with people that kind of give you those kind of vibes that they're out there to scare you, or, not out there to make your life better, then it's kind of easy to know who's got their, who's on the right side of that, as far as we're concerned.
And honestly, it's one more reason to plan this before you die. So you're not leaving your family or your next of kin with this decision that has to be made pretty quickly. And that's where that kind of predatory situation can surface, is if, a family has no idea. Sometimes they can be guilted into, making purchases that are suggested to them. So do your homework or pre-plan, and then you don't have to worry about any of that.
And a good way too is, if you're looking on Google, the first thing that pops up might not necessarily be the best.
Yeah.
What does it usually cost to have the help of a death doula?
I would say on average, you're probably looking at $50 to $75 an hour, depending on what's being required. Actually, I would say maybe 40.
Maybe even less, depending, 30 to 40, depending on where you are. Here in California, it might be much more costly than, some more rural. But a lot of times death doulas will put together packages, and, they'll sit down and work out with family on their budget, what they can afford. But you would probably, consider maybe $40 to $60, kind of in that price range an hour as an average. If you're putting together a package, it might be less costly per hour. But that's something that you would sit down and kind of break down the exact cost, related to your needs.
let's see. We had a question about if you've set up cremation as your body disposition choice, but you don't have someone in your life to receive the ashes after you've been cremated. What are some options for handling that?
Sure. I think oftentimes it will go into the ocean. There'll be a burial at sea. The same way if you donated your body and then it was cremated, you'll go into the sea with other folks that also have that sort of set up as their disposition.
Yeah, and that usually can be designated when you're doing your pre-need or your disposition paperwork. That can be directed if you have a durable power of attorney instead of a next of kin. And I believe it, like even a durable power of attorney will trump the next of kin sometimes. So yeah, it's either, designated a friend to see that through, or work with the funeral home or mortuary where you've made your planning arrangements, and they can make sure that you're scattered in the desert or in the ocean or
yeah. And if you have an end of life guide, because you might not have somebody in your life to help you at the end of life, they can help you with that too. An end of life doula like Penny or I could help with whatever you prefer. Yeah. They're working with them as your sort of death companion, and they can help carry out your wishes as you see fit.
We got a number of questions about green burial and some of the rules around it. So people were wondering if you would be able to have your body buried on a piece of property that you own. Is that something that people can do?
It varies state to state.
Well, California's no. California's no.
But there are some states where, yes, that's an option. California is a little bit of an outlier where it's extremely regulated, right? So any place where there's one person buried has to be designated a cemetery. And that requires a lot of bureaucratic red tape. You need, an environmental impact survey. You need permits. The list can go on and on. So in California right now, that's not an option. You would need to, if you wanted a green burial, have that sort of green burial site, or that burial at sea option is an option for California, especially here in San Diego. It's readily available in a way that green burial sites aren't necessarily available.
Yeah, well, we don't have a green burial cemetery in San Diego, other than the Masonic Cemetery in Fallbrook has a section designated for green burial, and then Joshua Tree. But it's definitely something that we believe we need in California, especially as people become more environmentally conscious and price conscious.
But yeah, right now, having yourself buried in your backyard or your home or your family property here in California is not an option. I'm not sure what state it is an option, but there are some states that do allow that.
It's all but two. Every state except for California and one other that I can't remember right now. But just about every other state you can. Now, what that means, I don't know. I'm sure you have to get permits and things like that. So if you live out of California and you're pursuing that, I definitely encourage you to look into the rules and regulations around that.
That's good advice. And I know that you briefly touched on that to scatter ashes in California, you also need a permit. So lots of things to look into ahead of time when you're choosing one of these options. Another green burial question was about whether the graves or the plots are renewed after 50 years. You'd mentioned something about, you're not buying, say, real estate in the same way with a traditional cemetery. So can you touch on that a bit?
Sure. They can be renewed more quickly than 50 years, and the rules definitely depend on what green burial site you're choosing. And it can be different at any of, the 450 plus sites that are in the country. So yes, the sites can be renewed, and each entity will decide what that timeline looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Someone asked about if there was any possibility that the date for human composting, the legalization date would be moved up from 2027 until earlier. They're saying that 2027 is too distant for them.
Yeah. That I don't know if I can answer that question. It's gone. The bills have all been passed, and it is legal. Now, why they selected this 2027 date, I can't tell you. It could be just because facilities need to pop up here in California to promote that. So, Sarah, I can share with you that I know of 2 organizations where you can have your body shipped and then returned as compost. So right now, I think that's the closest. I'd love to say, hey, if somebody opened a composting facility and it was ready in 2026, our government would allow them to open before the designated time. But the reality is that may not happen. So we're definitely keeping an eye on that industry because it is of great interest to us. And we can continue just to update, the Hemlock community on how it's progressing and who will be doing composting, especially in San Diego.
Okay, anyway, I wanted to make sure that the San Diego Memorial Society gets mentioned here and is included in the list of resources, because that's an organization that for many years has been fighting the high costs of dying and allows you to make choices in advance and make sure that people know about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Emmy.
Penny and Tara, is there anything else that you'd like to touch on before we wrap up your wonderful presentation today?
I just really want to say thank you to everybody for asking these really great questions and for sharing things like that, the scattering by air that, we don't know about. There's so many different things. The end of life industry is something that's going to touch everyone's life more than once. So there's a lot of really cool options that, are emerging every single day. And it's a dynamic sort of industry, if you want to call it that. But end of life space is dynamic, right? So as we evolve and as things change, it changes too. And I think it's really, really great that we are in a time where we get to see, all the new things emerging. And like I said earlier, technologies bringing us back to the oldest way of, disposition.
Yeah, no, this is, I love connecting with the Hemlock community. It's really nice to be in front of people who are comfortable talking about these types of things and have input and feedback. And, one of our biggest initiatives is just to create a little bit of, lifting that taboo and being able to have these open, honest conversations with our friends and family. So thank you for this opportunity to be able to do this today.
Penny, Tara, thank you so much. This was a wonderful presentation, and it was really fun to get to hear more about both of you and how you came to do this work as end-of-life guides. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.